So I've had several conversations with my next guest, from everything ranging to coaching businesses to entrepreneurship to personal stuff to just life in general. We've had some really cool, interesting conversations and became fast friends. Still not even sure how we became friends. We were on a call together, heard each other, and then connected, and it was really cool. We were talking the other day about some of the businesses that he's started and how he's dedicated his life to helping people find their way. And I said, really need to be on the podcast. We need to talk about this because whether you're in a corporate setting or you're an entrepreneur or you're trying to figure out, COVID kind of just shook you and you're trying to figure out how do you want to grow in your career, what you were doing all this time. It's almost like COVID gave us all midlife crises of trying to figure out what should we do, who should we be, where do we want to have ourselves, that kind of thing. So I asked Kevin Kermes to be on the podcast. He describes himself as a content curator, someone who's worked for 20 years helping individuals shatter old paradigms of what's possible, moving from impossible to not only a possibility, but tangible reality. And that's the reason I wanted to be on the show, because a lot of us coaches talk about what could you, if it was impossible, but you couldn't fail, what would you do? And Kevin actually helps people do it step by step. Like, what is the first tiny step you can do to make that change? He's built numerous companies, and his goal is to support freedom, impact, and profitability, so that there's, an exit, and there's a reason that you're doing these things. He's been an infantry officer, headhunter, Fortune 100 consultant. He's a father and a husband, which gives him depth. He's the founder and partner or principal in several companies: Create Next Group, K Squared Group. Kevin, I figured out what K Squared was after a couple of go throughs on this. Career Attraction. So he's constantly building businesses to help you figure out where you want to go in life. It's not what he does, it's who he is. Kevin, thank you for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark. I appreciate it.
So how did you figure out that for you, helping other people get where they want to go was your thing? Because when we start out, where it's like, how do we get a job, how do we feed ourselves, how do we do this stuff, and then you transition into how do I help others?
Hey, it's interesting. I never really, it didn't dawn on me till a few years back in one of those moments where, um, somebody asking me what I do, I'm kind of discounting what I do. I'm not really thinking there's much value in it. You know, all of this masked under like self-deprecating jokes, which used to be my go-to. Um, but I started to realize that I had this, and this is an uncomfortable thing for me to say out loud, but like I had this gift of being able to listen to what people were talking about, pay attention to what was lighting them up, what wasn't, where there was value and things that they did that they couldn't see, and start to bring that together, which was particularly helpful for people who found themselves in a place that they no longer wanted to be, but they weren't quite sure where they wanted to go.
Yeah, I wonder
And
if anybody listening has that going on right now, right?
which for me, the really interesting thing about this is, and somebody else pointed this out at one point, and it really hit home for me. I always think about these things going back to my time in the infantry as being on a map. If I know where I am, but not where I want to go, and irrespective of not knowing where I want to go, I'm not even making any movement, I constantly have to come back to where I am. So if we take this out of like the esoteric and the ethereal, we bring it back to reality. Well, I can't tell you what I want to do, Mark, but I can tell you what I don't want to do.
Right.
Is that helpful? Yeah, it's helpful, but it doesn't give you much, if anything, in terms of a navigational tool on where you want to go, much less to get started.
Mm-hmm.
It forces you to constantly recreate what you don't want, which then, if that's where you're focused, everything you're creating, everything you're doing, every experience, every, supposedly aspirational thing you're trying to do to move forward isn't really moving forward. It's
Hold on, hold
constantly
on, hold on.
recreating
Explain
where you are.
explain that. That's a little Joe Dispenza shit. So let's
Okay.
let's let's explain that a little bit more. So what you just said was, by constantly looking at what you don't want, since you haven't been able to figure out what you do want, you keep creating that. How's that work?
So our beliefs drive and inform, or rather, better put, Our beliefs inform our potential. Our potential is the fuel behind our ambition and our drive to take action against anything we do. And the actions and the results of the actions, or how we perceive the results of the actions, good, bad, whatever, the net of that goes back and builds on our beliefs. So if you're constantly focused on the thing you don't want to do, every action, inspired or uninspired, is coming from that place. It's, if this starts to get, for any listener or watcher, gets a little too heady, go grab James Clear's book Atomic Habits and look at how you build new habits. And you start out by getting very clear on what habits are supporting the identity that you need to build. It's required. It's not a want. It's an absolute need, in my opinion. You need to build to become the thing that you want to do next. What got you here isn't going to get you there.
So how do you make the shift? How do you make the so let's say I haven't figured out what I want. Most of us in life don't figure out what we want. Or if we do figure out what we want, we think it's impossible, so we don't even allow it into our consciousness. So we're kind of constantly looking at what we don't want, and we're in that rut. How do you start to make the shift to looking for what you want and making that part of your consciousness?
One of the things that was really helpful for me coming out of the military, and it's something that, again, one of these things I didn't realize how much it's informed how I've worked, whether it was as a headhunter, whether it's developing from a leadership standpoint, developing people on teams that I'm building out, all the way to the work that we did at Career Attraction, and now the stuff we're doing with Create Next Group. And that is the simple exercise of going back to people that you have worked with and you've worked for, and asking them, when you think of me, I mean, what comes up? If somebody called you and said, I have X problem, what is that problem that you would say, well, you got to talk to Mark? No doubt, hands
That's
down.
brilliant.
And what's interesting is, and I did this a couple of years back, actually about a year ago, with a couple of clients, when I thought I wanted to do a little more coaching, and I kept listening to myself say over and over again, God, I could just like clone the two of these people. I could just clone them. I would be happy, because I do this all day long. And I realized I know what our work looked like together. I know what it felt like. I can describe it from my side, but my side really doesn't matter, because I need to understand what it is for them. What am I providing? I'm not going to assume for a second that the things that I see that are valuable, or the things that are, I couldn't even separate out the intrinsic and extrinsic fulfillment, but because I get so focused on the intrinsic, that's a massive, massive driver for me. I needed to go ask them, what does this do? And what's so interesting are those things. This is where you get into that Gay Hendricks zone of genius from Big Leap. Those things that people tell you that had a massive impact on them, that you totally discount. You're like, well, that's just ridiculous. That's easy. Why can't we live in the world of easy?
Right. We discount the things
And
that are
all this
effortless
work
for
to
us.
get to this point. This was a big impetus for me in intentionally naming Career Attraction. It's not so much law of attraction, but I was just completely confounded at how difficult people's searches were after they had 20, 25, 30 years experience of absolutely crushing it at what they did. And they're kind of lost. And I'm sitting here thinking, my God, if you've got the track record you do, things should just be coming to you. They should absolutely be coming to
So
you.
what keeps that from happening?
Oh, I think number one, lack of clarity on where the real value is that you're providing. And even if that's no longer the place that you want to provide value, it is a starting point for a conversation. And I'll go back to the military.
Oh, yeah, because my brain split. I'm
Okay.
completely split on
Sure.
two different tracks. The ADHD is totally in here.
Dude, I'm the worst person to have on for that, because I am
right.
thick
So
of tangents.
the first piece that I was really clued in on is how challenging it is for veterans, for people who leave the military, who've been in such a structured environment, to now go create a life, right? Go create jobs,
See,
go figure out what you do.
That's really okay. So I'll touch on that one. That's interesting to me, because The way that I view the structure is that the structure are systems to solve the recurring problems so that you're freed up to focus on the bigger problems, like the complexities on the
Oh,
battlefield when things are
brilliant. Right.
massively changing, and you can't worry about the stuff that just should be able to take care of itself and everybody's on the same page, because everything's changing. The enemy's changing the way that they're engaging with you. A few years back, I got the opportunity to go to 2nd Ranger Battalion and talk to those guys and talk about what my part. I was part of a larger group, but my part had to do with transitioning post-military. And I said, it's interesting, if you guys go down to, aside from the military contracting side, if you go down to the career center or whatever the Army calls it now, and you go around at a job fair and look at what your options are, a couple things. Number one, it's going to seem very, very limited to whatever your military occupational specialty was. And all these guys are, for the large part, infantrymen. There's not a lot of stuff you can take the hard skill set of that and do outside of law enforcement or military contracting that would be illegal in the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's the story that's being fed to you, because that's the employer looking at how they perceive and how they want you to perceive your value from a negotiation standpoint. A myriad of things going on. What I shared with them was this. I said, you are a special operations unit that has been getting some of the most difficult and complex and constantly changing missions on the planet. And every night you're going out and you're going out and you're going out. And the op tempo is exceptionally high. And if you screw up in this unit, you're out, because there's, there are 20, 100 people waiting for your job. I go, the question is not what you can do, it's what do you want to do? So I'm not here to tell you that the question is not still daunting. It's just a totally different question in
So
the way
hold on.
you
So
ask.
what you did was you just took when you go to these job fairs, when you're looking at the requirements for jobs, you're qualifying yourself out because you're looking at what you did all wrong. You just changed the perception for me and for them of what they did, basically telling them you actually could probably do anything that you want.
Yeah.
Now the world is your oyster. Go figure that out. What a different place to
and
come from.
and if there's anyone in that world that's listening to this, the other thing that and this to me is one of the toughest pills to swallow with anybody I've talked to transitioning out, which is be fully prepared that first job that you have when you get out is not going to be the right fit, because you are going back to what we were talking about before about, hey, here's what I know I no longer want to do. Here's what I know I don't want. We are, for the most part, most people's searches are driven, or the catalyst behind it is that clarity around what you're moving away from. And the disservice that a lot of people do to themselves is never getting clear on what they're moving towards. So if again, we break that down to something everybody can relate to, which are relationships, it's kind of like going on a date and coming back to constantly talking about what you don't want, or former relationships that didn't work out, versus let me find the common ground. If there is common ground and there is commonality with the person that I'm getting to know, and if you want to take it a step further, what we could potentially create together is there's something here, not a shared disdain, which a lot of people will focus on, a shared disdain for things, and not that it's
Mhm.
not important to talk about the past and understand where people come from and all of that, but as what are we building together? That's important from a relationship standpoint. It's important from a job standpoint. It's critically important in the interview process, that you are getting the person sitting across from you who may or may not be good at interviewing, to get focused on and understand what do they really want to achieve, and are you excited about their goal? Are you just as excited, if not more excited about it? Again, that kind of that internal connection that you have with somebody, that how do you, because hiring is no different than the buying process.
Mm.
We go buy a shirt, we go buy a pair of shoes. Yeah, because we like how they look, blah, blah, blah. The net of it is how it makes us feel. We hire the same way. We totally hire the same way.
So now let's translate. You're already moved into like how this applies to everybody. So again, you're in a job, and you've decided something different. You
Right.
don't know what it is, but something different. Where do you start here?
So if we go back and if the jumping off point is going and talking to people that you've worked for, um, there are two pieces that I believe that we're fundamentally looking to replicate. And it's not, I want the perfect job like I had back here, or if you've never had a perfect job, I mean, welcome to the party. But looking at the components of roles that you've been in, looking at the components of teams that you've been on, and what did you like? What worked for you? What was it? So instead of, it's the antithesis of what I didn't like, what did you like? Hey, I really liked this relationship I had with this boss. Why? Well, it was, I got to do bottom up planning and drive it to my boss, who then was giving me a lot more flexibility to run things. One of the things, for me, it's a common misperception about the military. One of the things that I loved about several of the jobs that I had was just that, being in having these opportunities to do decentralized planning, to get intent and outcomes, and then like push up the solution, which I remember my father saying to me when I got that, because, I'm just wondering how long it's going to take you to realize that you shouldn't work for anybody else. You need to work for yourself.
Mm.
That, I think he probably used the word entrepreneur before I ever kind of
You're
put it on as a
basically
label,
saying you're
right?
unemployable. Go work.
Pretty
Go,
much. I
go.
think that's what he was really thinking. So again, bringing it back to your point. So once you have those things, starting to go out and have conversations with people about that, not the, here's what I'm looking for. I mean, if you figured out where you fit and where you add value and you're crystal clear on that, cool. If you're still in that stage where you're trying to figure it out, there are people out there that would love to not only see you be successful, but play a part in your success. So this to me is the interesting thing, and particularly for high achievers, we have this reluctance to go ask for help. We don't want to be a bother. Wrapped up in there is we don't want to show weakness. All
I
these
can't
things.
tell you how many conversations I have with people who don't want to reach out, don't want to ask, questions,
Yeah.
favors, anything like that. And I'm
Oh,
like, and then
yes.
I'm like, do you know how much personal and professional capital you have put out in the world? And by the way, I am so guilty of this. Picking up the phone for me to ask for help is like so
Right
hard.
there, 100%. Right there. I was thinking about this working out this morning, right there with you. Like, it's, the first thing that you learn from a leadership standpoint, or the first thing you should learn from a leadership standpoint, is as an individual contributor, your subject matter expertise, your ability to get shit done, all of that is what got you the job. Now it is no longer about you having all the answers, you being the smartest person in the room, or you having the best solution. It is about you understanding the problem enough to get the smartest people in the room to be able to suss out the best solution that can come from anywhere. It can come from an individual, or it can be a collective creation, and to be decisive in the execution of it, right?
The crux of my new book, the Rising Leader Handbook, is just that. It's that separation, that ego
Oh yeah, I
separation.
mean, your biggest battle isn't going to be with whatever your perception is of competition in the marketplace. It's your ego.
It's
One hundred
totally.
percent, it's going on in here.
I
There's no
finally,
doubt
I
about it.
finally get my guys to delegate and to empower the people under them, and they take their hands off a lot of the day-to-day stuff and all that stuff, and then they're like, what's my value? Like, why am I here? What do I do? And I have to, then they have to recalibrate every time. It's so funny that it just happens over and over again. It's like, I'm useless. No,
No,
you now need to develop
you are
different
responsible
skills.
for everything that happens or fails to happen, and you need to be able to free yourself up to be able to see what's next, to think strategically. Not you've got the tactical execution piece taken out. Now you need to be looking strategically at what needs to happen.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
amazing how cookie cutter that is.
it's a huge, bringing this back.
The ADD thing is going on real. So
No, but
let me bring it back here for a
yeah.
sec. Let me tell you where I am with
Okay.
this, Gail, because you and I could probably go on for 6 hours. What I got was, for the first thing I'm doing is I am asking people what it is, trying to find my zone of genius. If you had a problem to solve, like what problem would you say you got to call Mark, you got to call Kevin, right? What is it about? What did I do that just kind of was effortless and moved the ball forward? For me, it was when I asked that when I went back and asked that question, it's always when I was an asshole, when I said that nasty thing, when I was rude, I hated you when you said.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, it was the exact right thing. That was really hard for me to take because like I want to be a nice person. But like go back and find those things. Then what did you love? What worked in your last jobs? What did you enjoy? What interactions worked well? What kind of people worked well? So now you're armed with the positive, what you did well, what you did effortlessly, what people saw in you, and the environment that you
Yes,
thrived in,
that part's critical.
right?
Understanding the people that you work well with, what is the mission, is the wherever the focal point is for the organization, is that really important? For some people it is, for other people, it doesn't matter. Um, but really understanding what it is that is going to be the driver for you.
Mm.
Um, in terms of the next role. And going back to the asking for help thing, one of the things that I would consistently flip around on clients, because in at Career Attraction, when we had when people would be going through our program, you know, once a week, it'd have a call where talking to all the clients that were going through, and they're all super high achievers, and particularly, well, men and women alike would have this. They just said they'd come at it from different angles, but it'd be, I have a really hard time asking for help. I'm like, cool, I got it. I said, let me ask you this. If somebody calls you and asks you for help, how do you feel? Like, well, I mean, it feels great to help somebody. I said, so to borrow your language, you're kind of being an asshole by not allowing other people to feel that way. Let's just cut to the quick. Like you are being selfish by not being able to give that back. Other people want to help you. If they don't, they're not going to help you. If it's not in their DNA, if they don't give a shit about anybody but themselves, like fine, they're not going to help you. But there are people out there that will derive massive pleasure. And if instead, and they'd say, well, I don't want to be the person who asks for something and then never calls them back or doesn't follow up. I'm like, well, okay, well, that's interesting, because I mean, do you do that? Because there's a really simple solution for that. Don't do that. Don't be that person. Because once somebody if you call me and you ask me for my advice on something, not only in that moment is it going to, or hey, I just want to brainstorm with you, or collaborate, whatever language we use. In that moment, when we start to create something together, not only is there the satisfaction that you get out of helping somebody else, but think about how it feels when somebody comes back to you and says, man, Mark, that advice you gave me, let me tell you where that's led me now. And now you have the opportunity. When you talk about building advocates in the search, when you talk about people who are going to be able to open doors for you and help you network and build new relationships, that's how you do it. Make them part of, like, how do you get a team excited about a project or a solution that you're putting together? They all need to see their part of themselves and their contribution in it. I mean, that's the easiest way I've ever found to get people excited, not to come down from the mountain and go, here it is, this is what you're doing, now go. Like, no, you collaborate and you build it together. It's the same thing. And that's where, and as you're constantly evolving and doing this, and you've got this circle of individuals around you that you're keeping in the loop with it, that's where maybe last week they didn't know of anybody to introduce you to, but all of a sudden, God, why didn't I think about telling you needed to talk to Mark Silverman?
Mm.
Of course you need to talk to Mark. God, I don't know why. How many times that happens to me all the time.
Right.
I can't even believe I didn't think to introduce you to this person. Okay, I'll take care of that now.
Yeah, no, and the through thread for me is that positive, creative vibe that you just put through the whole thing. Well, I'm not looking, I don't want to travel and I don't want to do this. And I like, no, I want this. I thrive here. I am a gene, like I'm great at this, that kind of thing. And you're walking into every interaction with such a different vibe. I love it.
Yeah. And to challenge yourself around, my wife and I talk about this all the time. Jill is I say this with no hesitation, quite possibly the best, if not one of the best crisis communicators on this planet, bar none. The people who will call and ask for her advice, it is still mind-boggling to me to see some of the names of people who reach out to her. Her experience of that has been being in a war room, heads down, 24/7. And as we sit here and talk about next chapters and what do we do, because neither one of us wants to completely stop working, but we want to work on our terms. And we all run into this. Are the construct that maybe got us to where we are, maybe it's not necessarily the one that we need moving forward. Maybe it is, you need to think about yourself, going back to Hendricks and that upper limit. Maybe you need to think about what that upper limit is. What would it look like? Maybe you're no longer the person who's driving the war room. Maybe you're the person who is the strategic consultant that, quite frankly, nobody can afford to bring in except for, one day a week or for a couple hours a week to say, here's where we're at. What do you see that we don't see? That you can pull a lever, going back to that 20, 25, 30 years experience, whatever it is. All of that brings you to this moment where sometimes an hour at $10,000, $20,000 an hour, you can pull a lever that saves an organization tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, or a true PR crisis that, could be catastrophic to a brand, could be something somebody never recovers from. And that's, so I bring it back to anyone listening, thinking about what is it that you have that is so exceptionally valuable to other people that maybe either you discount it, or the way that you've done it, now there's an opportunity to level it up and operate, at a higher level than you have before.
One thing, I feel my ego balk at, what I'm genius at, what I'm great at, what, like, actually speaking that into the world. So what
Yep.
I've learned to do is make other people right. So when you go back and have that
I love that.
conversation with people who say, I would call Mark for this, I would call Kevin for this, no question, they're genius at this. This is their thing. Just make them right. If you'll feel the argument come up, make them right, own it, take it on, because most people see you better than you think they do.
Yeah. That 100%. And they're going to see things that we don't see.
Yeah, always,
Sure.
always. So curious, uh, if I were listening and I'm kind of contemplating what's next, I'd be like, how the hell do I get more of Kevin Kermes and what he's uh, creating? What are you doing? What services, what things are you doing in the world that people can avail themselves to?
Wow. So there are quite a few, and I'll kind of narrow it down to three.
Yeah, well, yeah. If his website is just a bunch of names of things he's created, so listen carefully.
I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with my website, and I think I've gotten there. So I'll leave that one for last. In the context of career management and figuring out what's next, as I like to say, working in somebody else's construct, career attraction is a great place to start. There's the career attraction website, but if you want to hear from us regularly, in terms of content that's curated across the internet, the thought leadership and ideas that we're putting out, and programs we're running, that's career attraction .community. Or you can go to careerattraction.com and you'll find your way there too. I am a massive believer, we didn't really touch on this today, that we're all businesses of one, and the pivot between and the opportunity to pivot between working for somebody else and working for yourself can be very, very fluid if you do some of the right things.
Mm.
And this is what we've created the Create Next community around, is showing people how to start doing that, how to get ahead of the curve and create some of these opportunities for yourself, whether it's, I just want to write an ebook and put it out there on Amazon to download some of my thoughts, all the way to, I'm going to build out a company either of one or of many, and that's createnextcommunity.com.
I love doing that in community because just
Oh,
jumping out of the airplane
yeah.
with a parachute and no instructions is terrifying.
No, that is absolutely. I'm a massive believer. I know we share this, that community accelerates way more, and this is something that I think executives need to think about, and anyone further on in their career believing that I am so specialized that therefore my problem is so unique. It's not. And the problem that you think you're tackling is typically not the problem that's really standing between, we're always the bottleneck in whatever's going on. So it's not really the problem that you think it is. And being able to see it in other people is interesting, because your subconscious already knows what the problem is, and you just need to free it up to let that out. And then the last is my site, which, as I said, by the time this goes live, this should be in a better place than it is right now, where I'm going to continue to talk about building these businesses in the open, because I'm fascinated to connect with other people who are trying to build things to drive change in the world, build other businesses. And I found that one of the easiest ways to do that is just share. Here's what we're learning. Here's what's going well. Here's something that didn't go so well. And I've watched some other friends who've been doing this, building their business in the open piece, and it's been really interesting. So if it can help other people, I know it'll help me to talk about it, because it requires me to reflect on it. So if it helps other people too, that's awesome.
Nice. What's your website?
It's kevinkermes.com.
Great. So I will be putting all those links in the show notes. So you can just go to my website, or wherever you're listening to the podcast, and click on them and find more of Kevin. Kevin, I really appreciate what you do for people. I appreciate what you've done for me, because you've been a sounding board for me, and an excellent one. And just really cool guy. So thanks for being here.
Appreciate you, my friend. Thank you.
And to everybody else, I really appreciate that you take your time and attention and listen and pay attention and comment and use some of the stuff that we do here. I love you a ton. Have a great rest of the day.